This episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know that one friend who always finds the best travel deals, picks the right cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach? How do they do that? Well, Smart Travel is like that friend, but in podcast form. They cover all things travel finance, like which travel cards earn their keep and which are just heavy, shiny metal, and planning group trips that won't ruin your budget or your friendships. So travel smarter and spend less. That's the key with help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. Armchair Explorer is a part of the Voyescape podcast network. Check out all of their shows from around the world at voyescape.com.
I remember thinking there'd be nothing as bad as this in the rest of my life. That's an amazing feeling to have. And I thought, wow, I've gone through this hell. And I think we all felt that as young men. We thought, it's amazing, it's been terrible. But we didn't realise that this was actually one of the better days.
Today we are going on an adventure with an absolute legend. Benedict Allen has undertaken some of the craziest expeditions I've ever heard of, but what's cool is he's also known for his authentic approach to adventure. He refuses to utilize contemporary technology when he travels. Instead, he embeds himself with the indigenous communities, learning from the people who call that land home. And after decades of exploration and travel, he has some unbelievable stories. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to Armchair Explorer, where the world's greatest adventurers tell their best stories from the road. My name's Aaron Millar. I'm a travel writer and your host, and I am so excited to have Benedict on today. He's been a lifelong hero of mine since I first heard about his expeditions to Papua New Guinea and an insanely dangerous and painful 6-week initiation ritual he did with an indigenous tribe there. We're going to hear more on that later. Don't worry, you're not going to want to miss it. But first, if you like this story, you can learn more about Benedict on his website, benedictallen.com, and on social media at Benedict Allen Explorer. Really worth a follow. His Instagram is awesome. And so is his writing. He's not just a rugged adventurer, he also knows how to spin a yarn and writes about his adventures with depth and insight and color and no small amount of drama. His latest book is called Explorer, The Quest for Adventure and the Great Unknown. Highly recommend it. One of the best adventure books I've read for a while, and I get through a few of those, Armchair Explorer that I am. He also has a ton of other books up there available on his website and in bookstores everywhere. We'll have all those details in the show notes as usual. And while you're at it, follow me too. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Armchair Explorer Podcast, and the website is armchair-explorer.com. We've got a newsletter up there too. But the best and most amazing thing you can do if you enjoyed today's episode is leave a review of the show. Go on, make it a glowing 5-star one, or you can post about it, tag me if you do, or simply tell a friend. We're building together a community of people who love the outdoors, love exploring, and want to live life with the full beams turned on. If that sounds like you, come and hang out. We're going to get on well at Armchair Explorer Podcast, or just click the link in the show notes. But don't worry about that right now, because we're about to go on a crazy adventure. Benedict was inspired from an early age, as many young boys are, by his father, who was a test pilot. Some of his earliest memories are watching his dad whooshing overhead in bomber planes. I think this is what helped me believe I could do something unusual, he says. Perhaps push myself in the same way my dad was pushing himself. So a 22-year-old Benedict cast his eyes on the map and settled upon, of course, one of the wildest and least charted places on Earth, the Amazon. But not just for a visit, oh no, not Benedict. He decided to attempt a crossing of an unsurveyed part of the Brazilian river basin between the Orinoco and the Amazon rivers. And it nearly killed him.
I just thought, right, I'm just going to give it a go once. And without any training, without any experience of rainforest, I just thought I'm going to do this. And I headed off. I had that lovely feeling that people have when they're about 20, I thought I was immortal. So off I went to the Amazon, and I tried to cross the northern Amazon, and inevitably, really, it all went badly wrong. I mean, when I came to some gold miners who, well, I still don't know why they did this, but they were drunk when they started creeping up on me, and they had knives, and basically they were going to kill me. I didn't investigate it. I still don't know to this day why they did this. Either they thought I'd stolen gold from them, or they were just criminals, because the Amazon's got a lot of them in. It's sort of hidden out there. Maybe they just didn't want me telling the outside world about them being out there looking for gold, panning the rivers. I don't know. I ran from these two men, ran down to the riverbank in the dark, jumped into the canoe that I had there, and paddled off into the night. And it was, incredibly scary. But it got even worse because my canoe capsized and I lost everything. Everything was washed away down the river. And I remember seeing it all go, all these bags, all my food, my provisions, my dog, everything I knew, everything that had kept me safe was just washed away. That was just the beginning of what turned out to be a nightmare.
6 months on from my departure, the forest had stripped me of everything, he writes. It's up to you alone now, I thought, hunched on the riverbank. Even today, the memory is never far away, the water running off me while I looked about in shock. I was overshadowed by plant life, overshadowed by my helplessness, the full reality of a human's lonely state. Getting out was a horrendous ordeal. By all odds, he should have died. He walked for 3 weeks straight. He contracted 2 types of malaria. He nearly starved to death. In fact, in despair, he was forced to kill and eat the dog that had been by his side for the last few months of the journey. That dog was about to die. It was one of the hardest things he'd ever done, but if he hadn't done it, he would have joined him and he never would have survived. So the Benedict that crawled out of the jungle on his knees was still just 22 years old, a kid. He'd been allowed to live, as he puts it, but he'd also been changed forever.
I was face to face with the forest, face to face with this place that I hadn't really got to know until then, and now I was going to have to get to know it. And this is why I say it was formative, because I suddenly realised how innocent, how vulnerable I was, and that I didn't stand a chance unless I started to look to that forest as something more like the indigenous people saw it as, which was more like a home. And of course they saw it as a place that gave them their food, their medicine, their shelter. And I thought somehow I've got to find a way of coming to terms with the forest. I was very lucky to survive. I staggered out of that forest, but I think it left me with a feeling that I needed to go back, get to know the forest that had almost killed me.
The history of British exploration is inextricably linked with imperialism and colonialism. It's about planting flags, as Benedict describes it. But after his experience in the Amazon, he felt he had nothing to learn by that approach, and worse still, it was intrinsically damaging and arrogant. He knew that if he wanted to learn how to survive in those places, he'd have to do it on the terms dictated by the local people.
And this, I think, was a subconscious or maybe even conscious effort to try and sort of start again and learn again in a different way, in a more humble way. It was the days then of Indiana Jones. The first Indiana Jones movies were coming out, and I was very conscious of the fact that if I acted like Indiana Jones as this sort of archetypal hero figure, I wouldn't last very long. And because I had no money, and because I was going to have to travel alone and just live with the local people, do whatever they did, because of this money problem, I realised this actually could be a solution, but depending on local people, not having companions, not having equipment, not having GPS, sat-nav, all these things that came along later, by being actually vulnerable, I can make a virtue of that and learn more. Because we all know if you're vulnerable, you have to learn more, and you're exposed, rather like a child is exposed. And that became my sort of philosophy, because you're forced to see the place in not a powerful way, but in a more sensitive way, to appreciate it, and of course, above all, learn from the people who really knew. Those are the local people.
His approach wasn't without controversy. From his family to his critics, many people questioned his approach of leaving modern technology behind. It was dangerous, foolhardy, and naive even. Or so it seemed to an outsider. But the indigenous people of the forest are the ones who know it best and who have survived in those inhospitable lands for millennia. Putting himself in their hands was an act of faith, but it was also an act of respect and done in opposition to that imperialist ethos of the explorers of old. But he wasn't quite ready to return to the Amazon just yet. So instead, he set his sights on the wilderness of Papua New Guinea, a place that at that time still had unexplored places on the map, and where only a few decades earlier, prior to his arrival, some tribes still practiced cannibalism, feasting on their enemies to gain their power.
Kandangay village in the Sepik River in northern Papua New Guinea. It's a sort of swampland and not a great place to settle down in a sense. In the winter, in the rainy season that is, the mosquitoes are terrible. So, I could have picked a better place, but I was so in awe of the communities I came upon in that area who were so resilient. Their sense of involvement in that landscape that we find so horrible with all these mosquitoes and the crocodiles and so on was quite extraordinary. They had found a way of keeping going even in the harshest, perhaps, of tropical environments. So it made me more in awe of the local people. I wanted to try and get to know how they tackled life, and again with the spirit of what could possibly go wrong. By now I was 24, but also I was idealistic. I thought I've got to try and start again and understand, well, from local people's point of view, who better to teach me than the Nyara, the people of this particular region, because they were so resilient, so tough, and they had this role model, the crocodile. I thought that's amazing. I arrived by canoe one day with some local people who said, Kandangay, yeah, they're a bit rough, the people at this village, but don't worry about it. They know so much about the forest. And I more or less walked into this village and said, you're amazing. You've got this extraordinary secret ceremony I've heard about to enable young men to become men as strong as crocodiles. I'd heard that every boy went through this ceremony, and he wasn't considered a man until he'd been through the ceremony, kept away, hidden in the so-called crocodile nest, which was a big fenced-off area around the spirit house. They were led into this place and kept there for as long as it took to become a man as strong as a crocodile. And I just thought, this is so amazing. And I said to the elder, I'll go through the ceremony if you ever would allow me to.
And remarkably, they accepted. In retrospect, Benedict has tried to puzzle out why. At the time, missionaries were arriving on the island in droves. The Niwara elders were feeling threatened, their ways of life dismissed and written over day by day. And here was a young white man who did the opposite, who praised their knowledge, who wanted to learn from them and document the ceremony in order to preserve it. They accepted, and Benedict became the only outsider to have ever been allowed to participate in this coming-of-age rites. He had no idea what he'd gotten himself in for.
A big fence was erected around the spirit house, and my head was shaven along with the other young initiates, young men about my age. And now we were led into the crocodile nest, the elders calling out to the Avuk Kwak, who's the great crocodile ancestor, crocodile spirit character, asking that this next generation will become brave and strong as crocodiles. And we were led into this crocodile nest and into the fenced-off area, the women crying outside, saying goodbye to their children, knowing they were going to undergo a lot of pain. And boy, was there a lot of pain. I mean, it was a nightmare. I had no idea. It's just this young person who was up for anything. But we were placed on upside-down turned canoes and cut repeatedly with bamboo blades. And I suppose we lost about a litre of blood, that's over 2 pints, cut repeatedly with bamboo blades up and down our chests and backs. And these were the crocodile marks, the insignia of the Nyara, but they were something like crocodile markings. So there were lots of little cuts that would be permanent scars, something like the crocodile skin. And I remember thinking, well, that's over and done with, thank goodness for that. I remember this distinctly. I remember thinking there'd be nothing as bad as this in the rest of my life. That's an amazing feeling to have. And I thought, wow, I've gone through this hell. And I think we all felt that as young men. We thought, we got these marks now. It's amazing. It's been terrible. But we didn't realise that this was actually one of the better days. We were now told to sing happy little songs while all the old men came out and thrashed us with sticks. And this went on 5 times a day. And it just went on and on. And it was just terrible, day after day, week after week. And yet, however terrible it was, we were also learning so much about ourselves. And this happens, of course, in the military, for example, in all sorts of walks of life. You know, you're being tested to your limit. We were being tested every day, being given this permanent crisis. And we learnt about ourselves more than anything. We learnt our weaknesses, we learnt our strengths. And we also we understood we wouldn't be allowed out of the crocodile nest until we'd learnt, above all, that we had to do things together. That's what the elders were looking for, because in the rainforest, but also every other difficult environment, desert, icy wastes, you can't do it alone. Humans can do great things. If we work together, we can do amazing things, but physically we're weak, we're weak individuals. The strongest bloke on the planet wouldn't last more than a few minutes against a lion, for example. And we realized if together we can do stuff. And so we began working together, looking after the youngest of the initiates, especially blocking the blows from these old men as they were hitting us again and again. So we became very strong physically and mentally, but we also knew each other incredibly well. And we realized the more we did that, the more we'd be likely to be rewarded by freedom.
Gradually, in enduring this ordeal together, the boys became a kind of unbreakable family. But there was also, he realized, an uncrossable gulf. We are standing together, bare except for the rope around our necks, he writes, and what everyone wants to know is how to access my wealth. For I am a white man emanating from the land of spirits and possibly know the whereabouts of the keys, the ones that unlock the coffers in paradise. The proof was everywhere. You only had to look at how rich Europeans are without having to hunt a single pig, he says. The rice, blankets, and tins of all this and that which are on sale in the local town, they all come from somewhere else, somewhere over the seas like him. So they asked him again and again to reveal the secrets, to show them the way across this incomprehensible divide. And he told them the truth, as hard as it was. But they didn't believe him, and they didn't understand. And so he did the only thing he could. He stayed with them and endured the ordeal side by side.
I was getting to know these people very, very well. As you do in any adversity, you get to know each other so well. And I said, what would happen if I left? This is actually slightly more hardcore than I was expecting. And they said that the elders would never allow it. They'd kill you if necessary. And I don't know really what would have happened, but it was very, very true that I would let everyone down. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it was bloody. But I was being allowed, the first person ever, first outsider ever to go through this ceremony. I was being allowed to witness everything, record it in my little notebook and go through it. It would be such an act of betrayal to those old men who were the elders who were maintaining this culture, and also betrayal of my fellows. So I just felt I couldn't, And finally, after 6 weeks, we were led out of the crocodile nest, this arena, pushed off through the forest, and then released into the water. This is what crocodile mothers do with their young. They take them to the water, they give them their freedom, and that freedom was now ours.
Benedict was now one of a group of Wambanis, boys hatched in the same crocodile's nest, and thousands of other Niara from other villages along the Sedik River were all his Wantoks, his relatives.
I was very conflicted because I knew I wasn't one of them. Of course I wasn't. I'm 6'4". I'm thin and gangly, and physically I was obviously totally different from the Papuans and their culture. But I've been given this wonderful honour, and I thought I now need to do justice to these people and this culture of theirs and go back and learn more. And this is where it became tricky, because I thought these people are inviting me into their homes and into their lives, and yet I could never really be at home there. I'm very restless, as you can imagine, of my career. But the bonds, I was in the Smark clan, which is one of 7 clans in the village, and I felt the constraints of that and the expectations to marry there and stay there forever. And yet I began to feel I wasn't really at home back in the West. I felt separated from everyone. I was no longer, I didn't know where I was at home. I knew I couldn't be at home in the jungle forever. I felt, where am I? I felt, I had these scars up and down my chest. I still have them today. And so I decided I had to do something about this for my sanity, if nothing else. And I decided I wouldn't go back again, not for a while anyway. Instead, I'd always come home to my culture and head off on different expeditions around the world, try and learn as much as I could, and not sort of ping pong between this village and my village, as it were, back in the West, because otherwise I'll just be totally lost. I won't be at home anywhere. So I had to sort of cut myself off and just maintain these memories in my mind, and of course the lessons of how to be resilient and strong in adversity.
2 years later, Benedict was back in Papua New Guinea, but this time he pushed deeper into the forest, past the Nuara, staying at a mission tucked in a tangle of trees, interviewing the people who passed through. Days fell into a comfortable, dreamlike routine until one afternoon, the sound of a helicopter bit the air, and with it, the news that changed everything.
Huge amounts of gold have been discovered in various parts of New Guinea. This fever had now infected, as it were, the interior of Papua New Guinea. And I was at this mission station, and I began hearing, though, of what was happening there, which was that the gold fever was exciting all these communities around, and they were coming into Basorio to look for the gold for this. But there was one community who'd held out, and the missionaries talked about them, the Yaifo, who lived up on the mountains, the central range of Papua New Guinea. Very, very remote place indeed. Up in the clouds. It was 1987. The area wasn't mapped. No outsider had been properly into this side of the range, the missionaries' side. And in fact, the maps were totally blank because they were based on aerial photos and this permanent cloud cover. And I said to a young man, one of the locals, one of the Papuans, wow, how sad, because no one's going to know the culture of the last people who lived up there, because surely the gold miners would be moving in on them too. And this young person, this was his culture, the last of his people, as it were holding out. So this young man, Sogamoy, he said, come on, let's go up there. And I thought, yeah, it'd be amazing just for a few days, the last few days of the Yaifo up on the mountain. I could just record their lives and it'd be something.
Soon after, as it happened, 2 Yaifo actually descended from the mountain to see what was happening below. The 2 figures appeared on the far bank, he writes. They peeled open the sun-blanched leaves as if parting a curtain, then moved forward. They left the shade warily, extending into the sunshine a leg at a time along with their bows and arrows, showing themselves like an apparition on our riverside. They wore leafy bustles and aprons, their foreheads were dressed in black paint, and from all about their heads sprang the white and crimson feathers of eagles and parrots. But mainly, I remember that the 2 men always seemed to be running, like felons not wanting to be caught. They ran to the airstrip to see where the ground had been cleared of trees, to a tractor and a shed, a small shop. Once, he writes, I saw something like panic in their eyes. And that same day, those 2 Yaifo men announced that they had seen enough and would be returning home. They agreed to take Benedict with them so that he might explain to their community these strange goings-on. So Benedict, along with a young man from the mission named Michael, followed their newfound guides deeper into the forest. They hiked for 5 steep days up the mountain until the trees suddenly parted and wood smoke filled the air.
We came into where we thought the Yaifo must be. The 2 guides had disappeared, and suddenly we realised why, which was that we were about to be ambushed. It was terribly quiet, that sort of quiet you don't really want, the whole forest really had gone silent. And suddenly that silence was broken by a band of, I can't really remember, 15, 20 men, young men with feathers, blackened faces. They leapt out, began circling us, slapping their arrows, clearly threatening us, and clearly just about to do away with us. They knew about the gold miners, they'd seen the helicopters, and they thought we were the beginning. So it looked very bad indeed. But then they got quite tired of, they couldn't quite decide what we were doing because we were just standing there terrified. It was only me and 2 local people, at least Papuans. So they thought, well, these people aren't much good. And they stopped dancing around us and sort of caught their breath while they wondered what to do with us.
Benedict walked towards them slowly, projecting his innocence, his vulnerability as he describes it. A man approached, staring at him, barely able to believe what he's seeing. He lay his bow to his side, and Benedict extended his hand. For a moment, he looked at it confused, and then, with a nervous half-smile, grabbed his fingers and smiled. Fear among the Yaifo had given way to wonder, he writes. This colossal weakling, an off-white coloured boy, had made it up through the dank greenery to see them. And evidently, he meant no harm.
Suddenly things changed. It was a very, very beautiful moment. The Yaifo were very aware that these were the last days for them up on the mountain. Perhaps the remotest of all settled people in New Guinea and maybe on the planet even. I mean, these people are so remote. They weren't nomads like a lot of the last indigenous people on the planet, and no outsider had ever been there. And they began telling me about their lives, and I had about a week there, a poignant week, thinking the Yaifo are going to leave. And these are the last days, and I'm the only person on the planet who can record these last days of this community. One of the last of the people who'd never seen shirts or trousers or boots or anything from the outside world. And so in my naive way, I wrote down as much as I could about these people.
Benedict recalls what he refers to as poignant moments, huddling under flat leaves from the rain, watching women knock the ash off a fire-cooked taro, hearing the scratches of men sharpening their arrow points using rat's teeth, seeing people hastily chopping down trees to build nests for the enormous metallic birds they'd seen in the skies. And then, at the end of his time, and maybe for the last time because their world was changing and they knew it, the Yaifo danced. Fanning the smoke, raising the dust, he writes, the fire burned lower and yet lower, but still the men strutted and spun around, a people who were for only a few hours longer subject to no one but themselves. And as they whirled, they chanted the names of the entities with which they shared their mountain, the lonesome couscous, the drowsy fruit bat, the spinning waters of the brook. They named them, these, their companions, as they stamped their floorboards, and they were defiant, and they were joyful. The next morning, as the sun rose, the Yaifo began to pack their things.
Then they looked like they were just about to leave and descend the hill, descend the mountain, just like all the other people, and go down to the mission station and become rich with the gold. This was the end. And so I didn't really want to see that. I thought, okay, I'll just press on away from the gold rush down in the lowlands. The Yaifo offered to send 2 people with me over the mountain, away from the gold rush to the safety of the other side of the mountain. And this is something, it's very, very strange to me that why would anyone go with me? These people had threatened to kill me, it looked like at the beginning, but why would anyone now do this scary thing of, the Yaifo hadn't crossed the mountain. They didn't know any path, there wasn't a path over the mountain, and nor did they wear much by way of clothing, they just had leaves around their waist. So to take someone ill-equipped, who didn't know the mountain, who didn't have maps of the mountain, to take me over this mountain was a huge risk. And it was, again, a very beautiful thing, just a generous thing. So striking to me, a perfect stranger who was a threat, essentially. I wasn't a gold miner, but I was part of that outside threatening world. And yet they'd done this decent thing. They saw I was quite vulnerable out there, just me with my boots and a bit of food, and that was it.
One of his companions was a young man about his age named Korsai.
He walked with me over this mountain. We sheltered in caves. I remember how I had to light a fire to warm up his feet because it was getting colder and colder, up and up and up to about 12,000 feet through this damp, through the clouds, through the damp moss. I had to keep warming his feet because they were getting numb and he just couldn't continue. And up and up we went, found a way over the mountain and to the other side. And once he'd seen that I was safe, I was within sight of other communities, he retreated with his friend back to the IFO. And I thought, that's the last time I'll ever see this generous man. And that's the last I'll see of his people, the IFO.
Over the years, Benedict had some absolutely absurd adventures. He was shot at by Pablo Escobar's crew. He crossed Namibia's skeleton coast on camelback. He walked 40 miles a day to cross the Gobi Desert. He struck out across the frozen Bering Strait with a team of dogs and quickly became separated from them. Yet over the years, the Yaifo village kept swimming back to the surface of his mind. And so when he found himself back in Papua New Guinea 25 years later, shooting a film for the BBC, he thought he might try to find them, or at least find out what had happened to them.
And while I was there, I bumped into Michael, this young person who'd been the missionary assistant cook at Basorio that had come along to help me on my little expedition to the Yaifo. I said, Michael, wow, how amazing. How are things? And what happened about the gold rush? I'd imagine it's just ripped the forest apart. He said, no, not where we were. It turned out that there wasn't much gold there. The gold miners gave up. And I said, well, what about the Yaifo, though? They all came down from the mountain, didn't they? He said, no. They changed their mind at the last minute. They stayed up there. It's really weird. The world has sort of forgotten about that whole mountainside. So I thought, I've got to go back. Of course, I can't be alive after 25 years. But I thought, I owe it to him, at least just to see what has happened to his people. Go back and shake a few hands and just see how they're doing and just thank them. I just wanted to thank the IFO for being so kind to an innocent, idealistic outsider who sort of blundered into their world. I was well-meaning, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I thought, how good of them, to have looked after me and taken me over the mountain. So I got a helicopter, very aware that you can get dengue fever now because of the gold miners bringing it in. So I had to get in fast and get up the mountain as quick as I could, and went back, and there was Michael. And we set about this expedition from Basorio. The missionaries are gone now, and Michael and I assembled this little expedition of other fellow Papuans, and off we went up this terrible, terrible mountain. The problem is we couldn't communicate with the IFO. Were they going to be there, really? And I began having doubts. I thought, well, not only might the IFO not be there, but what happens if they thought I was a gold miner again? Last time they had run around, threatening me, slapping their arrows. And maybe it was all going to happen again, because now that gold mine, Porgro, was incredibly powerful, a lot of social disruption around it, and a lot of guns, homemade weapons. I thought, this may not be such a good idea after all. And after all these years, I'm still being naive. Why am I doing this? All just to say hello to Korsai, who surely must be dead. Anyway, I carried on going and finally arrived in the village to find it was strangely silent. Just like 27 years or so before, I just thought, oh no, here we go again. And the Yaifo, sure enough, came out, burst out with their bows and arrows, with their black paint, with their feathers, and but this time the atmosphere totally different. It was just absolutely stunning. There's no fear there. There's no aggression there. It was purely celebratory. The Yaifo circled round and round and round me, just like they had when I was a young man. But this time, they were sort of saying, we are the Yaifo. We have endured. We have come through it despite everything. And they were welcoming me back. They were confident people who knew that they had done the right thing by staying up on the mountain. The gold rush had swallowed up a lot of people down in the lowlands who had ended up with nothing. But they had this mountain that was their land, gardens had expanded because they didn't have to worry about fighting the next door neighbours. All the neighbours are gone. And so it was a wonderful thing. But the most wonderful thing of all was there was this old man trying desperately to dance with the others, out of breath, really getting on a bit. And there was no doubt about who it was, and it was Corsai.
Though his body was weary, Benedict writes, his slender hands looking heavy, he had the same timid eyes as ever, the same open-mouthed look of wonder.
He had lived, despite everything, on this mountain with no medicine, no access to the outside world. He'd endured. And, I mean, even I'd endured as well. He was staggered that I was alive, because little did he know, by then I'd been shot at by Pablo Escobar's people. I'd had endless robberies, on my different adventures through my life. But nonetheless, I'd always been able to go back home and replenish myself, as it were. He had been alone on this mountain. I'm still alive, and it was just the most wonderful thing. And we hugged each other, and we didn't know what to say, partly because we couldn't communicate. I didn't know how to speak Yaifo, and all we had really were each other's names. And he said, Benedict, Benedict. And I said, Corsai, Corsai, Benedict, Benedict, Corsai, Corsai. We just said each other's names. And it almost, in friendship and love, these things are beyond words. And it was almost like that for us, it's beyond. We'd seen so much of the world, each in our different ways. Him by staying isolated on this mountain, but enduring. And me, who's been able to see so much of the world as an explorer, or whatever you call me. But, in the end, we had this special thing in common, and it was each other. Wonderful thing. We sat down together, just looked at each other and just smiled, and it was glorious.
Benedict stayed with the Yaifo for several days, scribbling in his journals and listening to their stories, hearing about all that had changed since he'd last set foot there decades earlier, this small patch of dense tropical forest that was the Yaifo's entire world. One afternoon, an impenetrably thick white fog descended, blanketing the village in an eerie silence. 3 children who'd been expected back home were nowhere to be seen, and Benedict watched as men called out for them into the mist. They called and called as if pleading with it, he writes, for so long that this became a terrible dirge, something of much deeper and darker significance. A haunting song, not for the lost children, but all lost souls. And though the mist eventually cleared and the children did return, that lingering sense of danger hung over Benedict as he prepared to depart and make the same treacherous journey back over the ridge.
I repeated the journey of before. I said goodbye to Corsai pretty well. What we both knew, I suppose we'd never see each other again. So it's very sad, but I just felt grateful, so grateful to have been able to see him. And I waved goodbye, and the people who helped me this time over the mountain were the next generation. So Corsai's son and a few others helped me up and up and up, over the mountain ridge, down the other side, just like the journey of before. But suddenly something changed, because we began coming across outsiders, and they said there's a war going on, 2 different communities fighting it out, and there is no way I would get through there. The people with me would be in danger, but I, above all, would be in danger because I was a white person, and it's white people who've been causing a lot of trouble in the area. And essentially, I found myself cut off. I couldn't get to the outside world and get out. And meanwhile, I started to get a bit ill. And I've had malaria a lot of times. I'd had it 5 times before this. And this, I was pretty sure, was my 6th time. It turns out I had dengue fever. And so I managed to head off to an abandoned mission station. And at this abandoned mission station, the Yaifo and the other people who were with me headed off in 3 different directions to try and get outside help.
He made it to the mission station but he was in a bad way. Very sick, cut off from medical help and all communication with the outside world. A handful of local families who lived there promised a supply plane might be coming. Each morning he would pack his bag in hope, and each evening he would unpack it again. And the longer he waited, the sicker he became. He knew if he didn't get help soon, he would die. Day after day passed, and it became clear to him that no help was coming. His only chance was to walk out. But he was so weak by now, the chances of him making it were next to nothing and getting slimmer by the day. He recorded a farewell message to his family, rolled up his meager belongings, and prepared to walk into the forest alone, and in all likelihood for the last time. But then, out of nowhere, he heard a whirring sound echoing above the canopy.
And it turned out a newspaper in the UK, the Daily Mail, had sent someone all the way from England to pick me up. Suddenly I was safe, but yeah, it was a near thing. I was in and out of fever by now, and I was very, very desperate, but always so aware of the part, not of my people, of the helicopter people and the Daily Mail and so on, but of the indigenous people. It was they who had sent the message out. So I felt encouraged by that and felt vindicated, I suppose, in a way, because I was later criticised for not, why didn't I have a satellite phone, Why didn't I have all this modern tech? But as I said, it's always been right, as far as I was concerned, to do things on the local people's terms, and why should I be rescued? And I was rescued, and I felt guilty about that. But on the other hand, it was the local people who got me out, who got the signal out, so it had worked.
His two YIFO companions had saved him, and eventually, through an improbable series of events, explorer missing in Papua New Guinea jungle made the headlines, and the Daily Mail, of all people, sent a chopper to rescue him. Over the course of 35 years, he writes, I had proclaimed to people who dwelt in woods or among the dust or out on the ice that I was no more valuable than they, and I was shown to be lying. He called his rescue an act of betrayal, and as the helicopter lifted above the jungle, he felt anguish, not relief. But the rescue hadn't happened because of the Daily Mail or the First World that rose up to save one of their own. It was his indigenous friends who rushed through the jungle on foot for days to get word out that he needed help. They had saved him and risked their lives to do so, this tall, pale-skinned stranger they barely knew. But perhaps he shouldn't have been surprised, for the YIFO are strong and resilient, and what he discovered returning more than 2 decades later and embracing his friend Coruscant was that though their lives are threatened, though indigenous people all over the world are fighting for survival, literally, and more often than not losing, here, on the top of one of the most remote mountains on Earth, there is still hope.
It was so against the odds that the YIFO would have persevered through all those years, and yet there they were. So my experience is that indigenous people are far from the fragile people that we have tended to think. They're much more capable. And it sounds patronising to say that, but I think again and again we're given these images of people who are vulnerable and people who are in need and need protecting and so on. Yes, terrible things have happened, and communities and whole habitats, whole ecosystems have been wiped out, especially in terms of the environment being depleted, but also the people who understand that environment being depleted. Nonetheless, again and again, and just more recently in Indonesia, in West Papua, I found that people are still there, still passing on the knowledge, still proud of that knowledge. And so I've been reassured. I think it is important to look for hope, and I have found it.
The YIFO, like the Nuara, like indigenous communities everywhere, draw their strength from nature, from the resiliency of plants that return every spring, from rivers that rise and fall with the seasons but remain flowing. We are ever more connected with ourselves, he says, and disconnected with our surroundings. That is the price of progress. And it's a high price to pay.
Throughout my career, actually, people have said, well, you're a throwback to another era. You're sort of Victorian, you're sort of left over. We don't have exploration anymore. We don't need exploration. But it strikes me that the way I do it is actually more relevant than ever. We are so connected, and it's important, and it's what is a wonderful thing about our age. We can keep talking, but it's also very dangerous because we connect so much and we never quite step away. I've got my smartphone here in my hand. I use that, but it's so important that someone or other, at least from time to time, or perhaps all of us, just step away and disconnect. And I think it's more relevant than ever that we all find a way of disconnecting from things that are familiar, that are safe, that are reassuring. So exposing yourself, being disconnected, I think has become increasingly valuable. So suddenly I feel I'm more relevant again.
And we can be too, because we are all explorers. It is hot-wired into every living thing, he writes, from the crusty lichen advancing through the seasons across its boulder, to the microbe that seeks beyond its petri dish.
And I do think, again and again, we're told the world has been explored. I hear this all the time. People say to me, wow, how can you call yourself an explorer? Okay, maybe you're the last of that old sort of sort who thinks he's an explorer, but anyway, the world's moved on. It's so untrue at various levels. The most obvious level is that we've only named 5% or so of the species on our planet, let alone understand them. We don't understand the little creatures in our backyard. So there's a huge amount that we don't understand about our planet. But there's another factor, which is, of course, we need to understand our planet more than ever now. It's not like explorers are irrelevant. They're more relevant than ever. Think of them instead as all of us, that we're all curious about the world. We've got to keep on being Livingstons. We've got to keep on looking at the world afresh. And yes, we've got to understand it more scientifically, but also as poets, appreciating it, sensing it, trying to fathom it. It's all beyond us, really, as humans. We know so little, and there's so much to learn. So I think we all are explorers, and there's a bigger job to do than ever.
At the end of the book, he writes this: 1.5 million years before Armstrong had tramped on the moon, Homo erectus made his mark in the sediments of northern Kenya, placing the ball of his foot to the clay, then pressing down, declaring himself present. And again, determinedly proceeding over the hills, Adam and Eve, beginning to appreciate the wider possibilities of their fall, the world of drudgery, but also possibility into which we had been cast. Through wise use of our knowledge, things might yet turn out all right. Communicating this, he says, this heartening message, is also the job of the explorer. Because, he says, the point is this: the human being at heart remains a poet. It's not enough to establish bold facts about our world. We need to experience with each fresh generation, to taste and smell and touch. Thank you so much, Benedict, for taking us on this amazing adventure and sharing what you've learned along the way. And as you heard in this episode, he really is a beautiful writer, and there's so much of this book that we didn't have time to cover, and lots of other stuff. So I highly recommend that you grab a copy of this one. It's called Explore: The Quest for Adventure and the Great Unknown, and check out his other books too at benedictallen.com. You can also follow him on social at Benedict Allen Explorer. Those links are in the show notes as well. And I also want to say this: being inspired by stories like this is amazing, but being inspired and then acting on that inspiration is even better. So if you think that protecting Indigenous culture and land and preserving their knowledge and wisdom is important, then post about it, tell a friend, look up a local NGO or non-profit, donate, shout about it from the rooftops. You can make a difference. So until next time, keep exploring as a traveler and a poet, because the more we look for wonder in the world, the more the wonder of the world becomes a part of who we are. Dare to be truly alive. This episode was produced by Armchair Productions. Find our other shows at armchair-productions.com. Jenny Allison did the guest booking and co-wrote the episode along with me. I produced the show. Charles Tyrie does the audio editing and sound design, and our theme music was written by the artist Sweet Chap. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll see you next time.
Quick question. Do you want travel tips from people who have actually been there?
Our show is co-hosted by Tim Johnson, an award-winning travel journalist who's been to more than 145 countries around the world. And I'm David Brody, the other co-host who's been travel podcasting for 20 years while traveling to 50-plus countries around the world.
In about 10 or 20 minutes per show, we break down a destination with the kind of insight you usually only get from long guidebooks or hours of research.
So if you want expert advice, zero fluff, and travel inspiration that you can actually use, search for Travel in 10 wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can also find us at voyescape.com.
Hi, I'm Pauline Fromer, host of the Fromer's Travel Podcast. We post new episodes weekly, detailing the kinds of money-saving tips and cultural insights that will make your trips richer without making you significantly poorer. We do so by interviewing real travel experts like TV host Samantha Brown, Fromer's authors from around the globe, and such public figures as Free Solo's Alex Honnold. It's a fun travel party. I hope you can join us.